Hi, welcome to Audiobook Academy. This is a self-paced audiobook. There's no need to keep an eye on things. Just pay attention. Thank you for taking the time to listen. This is a book summary of Freakonomics by Stephen J. Dubner. We've been brainwashed into thinking that math is difficult and boring. In fact, the mere thought of having to deal with numerical data causes many of us to duck or run for cover. Dubner and Levitt's brainiac duo proves that numbers can tell the best stories, and no one does it better than them. To the question of whether or not we can apply economics to our daily lives, Freakonomics provides an answer. When it comes to making important decisions, such as buying a house, raising a family, providing incentives, or even cheating, the authors show us how to use rational and critical thinking. When we follow the data and numbers, we see how often popular wisdom and belief are wrong, and this message encourages us to be curious about that as well. The dynamic duo of journalist Stephen Dubner and economist Stephen Levitt is a force to be reckoned with. While working on an article for the New York Times Magazine, Dubner met Levitt. The 2-hour interview turned into a 3-day powwow after neither of them showed much interest in meeting the other. It was a collaborative effort that resulted in books, a blog, and a podcast about economics and real-world scenarios that was born out of the powwow. The book's most important points will be summarized here. We'll look at a variety of empirical research to see how numbers often reveal secrets, how economics can add insight to everyday life experiences, and the power of economic motivation and incentives as a driving force of behavior. Debunking popular myths and critiquing experts will also be part of the discussion. We'll also see that humans can lie and cheat, but it's rare that numbers can do the same. How do incentive programs work? What is it that makes you do what you do? If it's money, what about family? What about your goals? The concept of incentives is at the core of much of what motivates us. Incentives can range from the subtle to the downright obvious. It's possible to reward good behavior with incentives. You might get a discount at the supermarket if you buy in bulk, or your boss might reward you financially for meeting monthly KPIs. Perhaps your pedometer is encouraging you to move more in order to meet your daily goal? Discouragement is another benefit of incentives. It could be a traffic ticket, a shoplifting photo wall of shame, or a negative letter in an employee file. Incentives can be broadly divided into 3 types, all of which aim to motivate us to improve our performance. The best kind of motivation is a combination of all 3, moral, economic, and social in nature. Bank robberies are illegal in the United States. Perhaps you've weighed the potential reward against the potential loss? Is it possible that it conflicts with your religious or moral beliefs? For another, you may be concerned about the impact on your relationships with friends and family if you're branded a criminal. Because of a combination of all of the above, it is highly unlikely that you have committed a bank heist. A bad outcome from a good incentive. Incentive programs are more difficult to design than most people think. Our natural desire to get the most out of a situation drives this. When creating incentives, it is imperative that any and all possible flaws and ambiguities be pointed out as soon as possible. On the surface, many incentives appear to be beneficial, but they can actually have unintended consequences. Research and interrogation are necessary for incentive design because it's human nature to want the best outcome for ourselves. Levitt, for example, discusses the experience of potty training his own child. When Levitt's daughter first started using the potty, she quickly grew out of it. Because he's the family economist, Levitt assured his wife that he'd take care of things if she just gave him a little push. Levitt discovered that his daughter's favorite candy was a particular brand, so every time she went to the bathroom, he would hand her a bag of it. For a few days, Levitt was quite content with the outcome of the situation. Even a 2-year-old can find a way around some things. There was a dramatic increase in how often her bladder needed to be emptied, which allowed her to go to the bathroom more frequently and thus earn more candy. The fact that a toddler can fool a Nobel Prize-winning economist shows how difficult it is to design incentives. A creative person will always find a way to get the most out of a situation and break the rules. While it's relatively simple to fix incentive schemes that fail on the micro level, what happens when they fail on the macro level? Things start to fall apart, and the unthinkable occurs. For instance, would you believe that a large number of teachers began to cheat on the SATs? Consider the United States of America in the late 1990s. In order to improve test scores, a few states decided to reward or punish schools based on overall results. Higher test scores were rewarded financially by the federal government, which increased school funding and gave teachers larger raises. Schools with low test scores, on the other hand, were severely penalized. Teachers lost their jobs as a result of the government's funding cuts and withdrawals. Teachers were under a lot of pressure to improve results because of the high stakes. Problems arise when you force people to choose between two options that are so diametrically opposed. If the difference between $25,000 and losing your job was only $25,000, which option would you choose? Apparently many teachers gave into the pressure and did everything they could to boost students' scores on the standardized tests. They extended the time allotted to students, provided the answers, and even went so far as to fill in the blanks themselves. But if you're not in the room, how can you prove that someone is lying? Because numbers don't lie, our authors advise you to carefully examine the information you've gathered. The policy was criticized by a wide range of individuals and organizations, but no concrete evidence could be found to support the claims of corruption. This is where the statisticians come in. When the 7-year-old data was examined closely, it yielded some fascinating results. In the first place, students who had previously had poor test scores did exceptionally well. Some large classes performed well, despite having performed poorly in previous years. Many students were incorrectly answering easy questions, but correctly answering the more difficult ones. It's no secret that economists and statisticians believe in the non-existence of chance events. Their investigation revealed the rot in the school system as a result of this misguided incentive program. A total of 200 classes per year, or 5% of all those in the Chicago public schools, were found to be engaging in unethical behavior. When people's motives do not match. Is it naive of us to put our faith in experts? Every aspect of our daily lives is becoming more and more specialized, and we have access to a wide range of options. We all make bad choices from time to time, but some of them have far-reaching consequences. We often rely on experts to guide us because of the enormous number of choices we must make, but this doesn't always have the desired results. How do you tell if a person is an expert? It's common belief that experts have an ethical compass that prevents them from using their advanced knowledge to deceive the public. However, this is rarely the case. Experts, like everyone else, have their own agendas. To put it another way, there is information asymmetry, or a disparity in power between parties when knowledge levels aren't aligned. Asked for help at the computer store, or the car mechanic, and ended up feeling completely out of your depth. How many times have you done this? They often exploit this by putting themselves ahead of the person they're supposedly trying to assist. Expertise can be a huge currency, and we must be critical of the many imbalances in this area. The rise and fall of the Ku Klux Klan is a good illustration of the adage knowledge is power. We might think that the organization's power is in spreading fear and violence, but researchers found that information was a major factor in giving power to the domestic terrorism organization. The KKK used their secrecy to give the impression that they were much larger and more well-organized than they actually were. Those who didn't know about this secretive group thought they were more powerful than they actually were. Two journalists infiltrated the Ku Klux Klan in the 1940s and uncovered a great deal of information about the organization. Journalists quickly spread the word about the KKK's existence once they learned of its existence. The KKK became less intimidating as a result of the group's exposure as a secret and mysterious organization. The Klan's facade crumbled, and the public began to see them for what they really were, a group of illiterate and unemployed people who could be mocked rather than feared. I'm doing it via the web. They say that knowledge is power, but they also say that knowledge in small doses can be hazardous. The internet has a bad reputation for fostering illiteracy and spreading false information. The internet, on the other hand, has done a great deal to close the information gap. How can you save $1 billion on life insurance? The first step is to make information more widely available. The rise of the internet has made it much easier to obtain information. Rather than relying on experts to shed light on complex issues, we now have access to a wealth of information on a variety of topics. Choosing a life insurance policy can be a difficult task. Most life insurance policies are fairly standard, but the price can vary significantly, and before the internet they were able to price their policies in such a way that they were uncontrollable. Because price comparison took so long, most people relied on the advice of experts. As a result, there were many issues, and consumers were frequently taken advantage of. The insurance industry had no choice but to lower prices and become more transparent when price comparison websites emerged. Bypassing convention and digging deeper. Critical thinking and asking more probing questions are two of the book's major themes. Our authors encourage us to think outside the box, even if it's controversial, because we often take data at face value. It was a gloomy start to the decade in the United States. Analysts predicted that crime would continue to rise in the country throughout the next decade. As a result, experts were perplexed as to why crime decreased in the 1990s. 6 factors were cited by experts to explain the decrease in crime. As a result of these 6 factors, economic growth, increased incarceration rates, increased police presence and gun control as well as the aging of the population. Authors in our study concluded that these factors were only a partial explanation for decreased criminal activity. However, Levitt estimated that the 6 factors, although important, did not add up to 100%. He argued that something happened in 1973 that could account for the missing 40%. In this case, let us follow the author's reasoning. Abortion became legal in the United States in 1973, thanks to the landmark case Roe v. Wade. The majority of women who have abortions are teenagers, poor, unmarried, and/or dependent on drugs and alcohol. Consequently, their children are more likely to grow up in unstable environments, which could lead them to engage in criminal activity. As of 1980, 1.6 million abortions had been performed, with a significant number coming from the demographics outlined in this article. After 20 years, crime began to decline, and the authors believe that this is due to a decrease in abortions. There is also research that Levitt and Dubner recommend. This is not a debate about pro-choice or pro-life, according to the authors. What we're really looking for is a more thorough investigation of all of the arguments. When it comes to common sense findings, we must examine the numbers. Curiosity and inquisitiveness are key to understanding that the world is not black and white and that we cannot categorize results into neat boxes. Cause and effect. One of our favorite ways to simplify the world is through the use of cause and effect. Perhaps it rains every time you clean your car. Maybe you always do well in exams when you have your lucky charm with you. Someone may have given you the idea of inducing genius in your unborn child by playing them a CD of Mozart's music. When it comes to the high-octane world of parenting, causality and correlation can be seen very clearly. It's likely that whether you're a parent or not, you've pondered what it means to be a parent and talked to others about what that means. Increasing amounts of advice and paraphernalia are available to help parents raise their children. Because the field is constantly evolving, experts often have to go back and forth on what constitutes good parenting and what does not. Even something as basic as a good night's sleep can be a dangerous proposition. Experts once endorsed the practice of co-sleeping, but it's now considered dangerous. Stomach sleep was once the preferred position, but now it is discouraged by medical professionals. In fact, some claim that it raises one's risk of dying. In today's world, parents are urged to do everything they can to give their children the best possible start in life. In the 1990s, the Department of Education in the United States conducted an interesting study. Over 20,000 children were surveyed in the Early Childhood Longitudinal Study, ECLS. From kindergarten through 5th grade, these children were studied. The researchers interviewed a wide range of people, including the children's parents and teachers. Things like visiting museums, watching a lot of TV, attending baby and toddler groups, having a stay-at-home mom, and coming from a heteronormative 2-parent household were found to have no effect on test scores. According to the findings, a child's academic success may be linked to their parents' innate characteristics. This shows that parents' personalities matter more than their actual parenting skills. They argue that if you buy 20 parenting books, it's unlikely that they'll help you in any way. However, the fact that you're interested in purchasing these books is important. To sum it up, we are encouraged to ask unconventional and unpopular questions in Freakonomics, a book that encourages this. Not being right is more important than having the courage to ask provocative questions that go beyond the obvious. What if you had a different name and were more well-known? What if you had been offered a financial incentive to improve your grades? Do you have any ideas about what might push you over the edge into cheating or violating the law? Our daily lives and behaviors are revealed to be incredibly complex when we examine data that is both in-depth and fascinating. In this book, the case studies and arguments are unconventional and contrary, and it doesn't matter if we agree with them or not. The real joy is in the boldness and compellingness of the arguments and analysis. It's up to us to challenge our preconceptions and broaden our horizons. And the first assumption we must dispel is that numbers and data are tedious. Thank you for listening in Audiobook Academy. Please don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. See you in next audiobook.